Hi everyone, it's Natalie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm finally going to be talking about my top 10 books of 2020. This list at first was very difficult to narrow down. I wrote down originally like 20 something books. Like, I don't know if you can see that, but I had a lot of books. Mostly because I rated, I think, like 21 books I read this year 5 stars. So I had a lot to choose from, and honestly, not even all the books that are on this list I think I gave 5 stars. I think some of them I gave 4 stars because my 5 stars sometimes are just me acknowledging that something is really good, but it's not necessarily perfect for me. I just know that it's good, and I'm like, giving it anything less than 5 stars is a lie. So I just give them 5 stars. So a couple of the ones I'm going to mention here are going to be actually 4-star reads, but whatever, it's my list, it's my top 10 list, so I can do whatever I want. I also won't be mentioning these books in any particular order. I'm just going to mention them basically in the order that I thought of them, because thinking of like actually ranking these books from 1 to 10 sounds like a literal nightmare of mine, so I'm just gonna mention them. So let's just get started. The first book I'm going to be talking about should not surprise a single soul. Like, not a single soul. If you've been here for a while, you already know the book I'm going to mention. And of course, if you don't know what that book is, you probably haven't been here that long. Hello, welcome. I am a House in the Cerulean Sea stan. The House in the Cerulean Sea was my everything in 2020. I read this book 3 times in 2020, and I started a 4th reread. I'm actually in the middle of it still because I'm buddy reading it with Anna from Books and BS. So it's been taking a bit longer, but read it 3 times. 3. If that doesn't tell you how hardcore my love is for this book, I don't know what else will give you that answer. But basically, to briefly talk about what this book is about, it's about this man named Linus, who is a caseworker who goes to orphanages of magical creatures to make sure that they're being run properly and to make sure that the children are being treated properly, they're not being abused, etc. And he's given this special case at this remote island to look at this very specific and secret orphanage. And while he's there, he basically learns that things are not as he thought they were, and he falls in love, and it's a romance between 2 grown-ass men. And I stan that, and I also stan found family, and everything about this book was just perfect. It was a perfect book to read in 2020. If you needed like a textual hug, like a book giving you a hug, this was the book to read. This is just precious, and I love it a lot. Another of my favorites of the year was Darius the Great Deserves Better by Adib Kharam. I was originally unsure if to include this book on this list, but honestly, the more I thought about it, and the more I thought about the fact that I gave a sequel 5 stars, I was like, I need to include this book, because even though rage was the reason I kept reading, it was brilliant. It was brilliant because it managed to keep me engaged, because I love the main character. I love Darius, and so seeing things not going well for him made me very protective and made me want to keep reading to make sure that he turned out okay by the end, basically. So this had to be on here. This had to be on here because I love him. And essentially, as I said, this is the sequel. The first book is Darius the Great Is Not Okay. In that book, Darius goes to Iran because his grandfather is ill, and his parents want him to spend some time with his grandfather before he passes away. And so in this book, we're just following the aftermath of that. And Darius starts his first relationship. He's now openly out. He has a boyfriend, and it's about the stuff that happens in this first relationship he has. I also don't know why I'm doing this backwards, where I rave about the book first and then give a summary of it, but I'm just gonna roll with it. The next book I absolutely loved in 2020 was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This was the perfect horror for me. This was the horror that let me know what I actually want to read in spooky books. Like, I want a spooky book that is thematically rich and that has a romance and that has well-developed characters. Is that really too much to ask? Is that too much to ask from horror books? I don't think so. I don't think it's too much to ask for every horror to be anywhere close to Mexican Gothic. Like, just try. Just try. Because really, that's why I can't get into mysteries and thrillers and horrors, because they're all empty. They're devoid of substance. And I'm like, I can't live my life that way. I need you to be trying to say something. I need you to have characters that I am invested in, that I want to see succeed, that I want to see survive. Or, you know, villains that I really, really want dead, or that I really want to support. I'm like, just make me feel passionately about your characters one way or another, which most horror, thrillers, mysteries don't do at all for me. And then sprinkle in some romance there too, because I'm like, why not? Freak me out a little bit, romance me a little bit. I think that's perfect. So that's why Mexican Gothic is for sure one of my favorites. I really want to reread it. I really want to get a physical copy so I can annotate it and make it beautiful. So Mexican Gothic is about Noemi, who receives, I believe, a letter from her cousin telling her that some freaky stuff is going on in her house. She recently married a man and she moved in with him, and the house is doing strange things, and she wants Noemi to help figure out what's going on. So Noemi's father agrees to send her to check in on her cousin, and once there, Noemi realizes that there is some messed up shit going on in that house, and she starts getting sucked into it. And it's about what happens after. The next book I'm going to talk about is my favorite romance of the year, because 2020 was a year of me embracing that I love romance books. I love reading romance. I don't always love every romance book I read, but there's something about it that is just so comforting. There's something about it that just makes me feel happy. So of course, I have to mention Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. I would do anything for Red and Chloe. They are precious. They need to be protected. They need to live happily forever. I guess basically the pattern for me here is that I love feeling protective of characters, and both Red and Chloe gave me that, because Red had this very toxic relationship before he met Chloe, and it kind of wrecked him, and I wanted to protect him from all his hurt. And then Chloe is trying to find her independence because she's disabled and she hasn't quite figured out how to live her life to the fullest within her abilities. And so I love that as well. I'm like, yes, give me Chloe figuring out how to live her best life. That is what I want. That is what I need. And so you put them both together, and I adored Get a Life, Chloe Brown. It was just so good. Talia Hibbert always delivers. She is iconic. She is amazing. So of course I had to mention her on this list. And I think I basically vaguely said what this book is about by raving about it. Essentially, it's called Get a Life, Chloe Brown because Chloe's trying to get her life together. She's trying to live a more exciting life. And so she makes this list, a kind of bucket list of things she wants to do to get a life. And so essentially she meets Red, who is kind of the superintendent of her apartment building. Not really, but sort of. And he basically helps her check off the things on her list. And they fall in love, and it's cute, and I love it. The next book is Let Me Hear a Rhyme by Tiffany D. Jackson. Of course, I had to include this book. This is another book that I read twice this year. Not once, but twice. The first time I listened to it as an audiobook, it was excellent. I highly recommend this book as an audiobook. I think the narrators do a spectacular job. And then the second time I read it for college, and that's why this one is tabbed in this way. So yeah. Point is, I really loved this. I loved the music elements in this story. I loved the characters. I loved the messages. I was so invested in what was going on in these characters' lives, and following their grieving process, and following them figuring out what to do after they lost someone they love dearly and are also on the cusp of figuring out what they want to do with the rest of their lives. It's just fantastic. At the heart of this is a mystery. We're trying to figure out how the brother of the female main character died. He was murdered no one knows what happened. The police isn't really trying to figure out what happened. This is a historical fiction set in the 90s, and obviously we have a black teenager, so the police don't give a shit that he died and how he died. And so his sister is trying to figure out how he died, while at the same time making sure that his dreams survive his death, because he wanted to be a rapper. And so she and her brother's two best friends are trying to get him a record deal even though he's dead. So amazing, incredible, truly worth a read. The next book on this list is The Revolution of Birdie Randolph by Brandy Colbert. This was another one that was just perfection incarnate. It was everything. It was everything. I loved it so much. I can't even put it into words by now. I just think it was brilliant. I just think it was so good. And I don't see nearly enough people talking about it when it is such an incredible read. How do I talk about this book? Basically, I just loved how complex the characters were. I loved that it wasn't incredibly dark, but also had other serious topics. And I loved how it explored drug abuse, how it talked about adoption and infidelity, and just so many things. It was just very good. And I don't know how to summarize it any better than with the chaotic hints I just gave you. So I'm just gonna move on to the next book. The next book is Never Look Back by Lilian Rivera. Y'all have heard me talk about this book quite a few times on this channel. I loved it a lot. I think the writing of it was just near perfection. It wasn't perfect because this book got 4 stars instead of 5 stars, but I really enjoyed the writing style of this book. I think Lilian Rivera really has a way with words. The way she chooses language, I think, is incredible. This had some scenes that were very atmospheric and just transported you into this other world in such an incredible way. It was just amazing, truly amazing. And the romance in here as well, although I had some issues with it because in parts I was kind of like, this is not super believable. By the end of the novel, I was invested. I was interested in them. I wanted to see them make it through the book. I wanted to see them survive the trials that were put in front of them. Just so good. So good. And basically this book is a retelling of the Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. I think it does it really well. I think it's such a nice spin on the myth, and I did a whole project for college thinking about this book. Like, I read this book and it inspired me to make this whole curriculum plan based on retellings and taking these classic stories and putting a spin on them that focuses on either queer characters or people of color. It was just so good. So yeah, basically it's an Orpheus and Eurydice retelling where Eury was misplaced from Puerto Rico because of Hurricane Maria, and she's staying in the Bronx in order to figure out what to do with her life. Essentially, she has been very emotionally destabilized because of the sudden move, so she's just trying to figure out herself. And Theos is basically trying to grow into something more. He's basically just a bachata singer who's just out there for the ladies, and in this book it's just kind of his journey to being a little bit more than just that. The next book I'm going to talk about is An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. See, I'm reaching the point in this video where I'm just completely illiterate. I don't know how to talk about this book. I don't know how to talk about how incredible it was. I don't know how to talk about how all the characters were so complex and so unique and so interesting. I was invested in them. I wanted to know what would happen in their lives. I wanted to know if they would make it through. I wanted to know where their relationships with each other would go. It was so very good. So yeah, this book is just incredibly written. I listened to it as an audiobook. I think the audiobook is very good. I really like the narrator of the audiobook. I just I don't know, I just vibed with the narrator. And yeah, the ending kind of blew my mind. It was not at all what I was expecting. So it kind of crushed me, but at the same time, it made so much sense. But at the same time, I didn't know what to do with it. It was just not at all what I was anticipating. And so I was just kind of left feeling like I had been abandoned in the middle of the desert and I had to figure out what to do with my life after. So it was that kind of book. And basically this book follows Astor, who lives in this ship that is kind of modeled after the antebellum South. The white people live in the upper decks and they basically control everything, and black people are subjugated and forced to do labor. And in this book, you're following Astor as she's trying to figure out something that her mother had been working on. Her mother passed away and she's trying to both reconnect with her mother while at the same time trying to understand her mother's work and what it meant. So it's kind of that, along with other characters that play a significant role and make this book just such an incredible read. The next book is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a memoir told in vignettes, and it was, I don't have words to describe it. It was incredible, heartbreaking, beautifully written, haunting. I listened to it as an audiobook. The author is the narrator of the audiobook, and just listening to this, to the story of this abusive relationship that she was in, was just wow. It was a lot. It was a lot, but also so very, very, very good. Like, I can't imagine going through something so traumatic and creating something so beautiful from it. So I don't know what else to say, but it's very, very good, and I appreciate that the author put her story out there and basically said, I want this to exist so that when historians look back, they can see that people were talking about the toxicity sometimes in queer relationships. Queer relationships are not perfect because they're queer. There is abuse. There is patterns of emotional, physical, sexual abuse in these relationships. It's not just perfection. So I think that is an incredible goal, and I'm happy I read this book even though it was not a happy book. So the 10th book on this list, and the last book officially on this list, is Cantoras by Carolina de Robertis. This is another book that the writing was just beautiful. I was just transported into the story. I think I also listened to it as an audiobook, and I just found it both soothing and compelling. The story wasn't exactly soothing, but just the writing of it was so engaging that I was just kind of in it for the ride. And that's also because this is a very character-driven book. The characters aren't as fully realized as I would like, but they are still interesting, and I still wanted to know what happened to them, what happened in their lives. And I don't know, I just think it was a really, really good book. It's essentially a historical fiction set in Uruguay, and it follows these queer women as they try to make lives for themselves, as they try to navigate this world that seems uncertain. And so I also wanted to include an honorable mention because this book rocked my world at the end of the year. So I just had to talk about Night Shine by Tessa Gratton. This is one of the books that I gave 4 stars instead of 5 stars, but I still had to talk about it. I had to talk about it because it just gave me so many emotions. It made me feel joy, it made me feel anger, it made me want to go out into the world and burn it, but also live freely and happily and just take my life and just go with it and just do what I want and find joy and purpose. And just it was how can I talk about it? It was not perfect, but it made me feel very intensely. And it had at the heart of it this complex relationship between characters, and the way they all navigated interactions with each other was so interesting, which is something that Tessa Gratton excels at. Tessa Gratton is a master at writing characters that you kind of don't understand why they love each other so much, but at the same time you do, and at the same time you want them to be so fiercely protective of each other and so fiercely in love and so intense, just so intense. So it's just, I had to include it. I had to include it even though it's an extra book, even though I gave it 4 stars, because it just did a lot for me. It especially did a lot because I watched Howl's Moving Castle, because I knew this story had kind of inspiration from it. Like, it's not really a retelling of it, but if you watch Howl's Moving Castle and you read this book, you will see the parallels, and you will see how Tessa Gratton took Howl's Moving Castle and made something incredibly queer and also incredibly unique from that. So it just literally, once I watched Howl's Moving Castle, my brain just exploded. I was like, I am transcendent. I understand the world now, which obviously is ridiculous. But because of that, I had to include this book, which actually, you should know that now I'm a Howl's Moving Castle stan. I had not ever seen it. I saw it for the first time at the end of 2020. I saw it again on the 1st of January because I was in love with it, and I continue to be in love with it, and now it's all I want to think about, all I want to talk about, all that consumes my thoughts. So yeah, I have Nightshine to thank for that. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this is gonna be a pretty long video, but I did it. I managed to pick 10 favorite books and only mention 1 honorable mention, so I'm happy about that. Please let me know down in the comments what your favorite book of the year was, or some of your favorite books of 2020. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you would like to follow me on any of my social media, I will have the links to that down below in the description. But for now, see you next time.